Hello everyone, my name is El Parnaso, and in today's video I'm gonna talk about one of my favorite cards of all time. One of the most intelligent, complex and intellectually rewarding cards in all of TCG's history. That's right, I'm talking about Mystic Mine, your favorite card. In case you don't know, this is a field spell that in simple says that if your opponent controls more monsters than you do, your opponent cannot activate any monster effect and cannot declare an attack. Very powerful, right? However, what if I told you that even when this card was at 3, there were metas when people actively decided to not put it in their deck because of how bad it was in that environment. That is what I wanted to talk about today, how Mystic Mine is actually a very fair card, and even today, and the last 2 years of Yu-Gi-Oh's meta, this card will have sucked either as a tech going first or as a tech going second. So why is it still banned? Well, in order to understand that, I'm going to make a little brief review of how basically all the meta decks for the last 2 years at least dealt with Mystic Mine easily. Then I'm gonna show you how the tech of Mystic Mine going first, even with Metaverse at 3, will suck today. And after that, we're gonna make ourselves the question, why, if this card is so bad and so fair, is it banned for the last 4 years? So obviously, the first example I'm going to make is the Justice Hunter format. So if you remember how Yami worked back then, you can see how easily the Mystic Mine can be exchangeable with any of your heralds. Therefore, this Mystic Mine could have been a Raigeki or a Forbidden Chalice, and the exchange would have been the same. Not only that, if you are for whatever reason forced to use the herald, the deck in their own development of their combo has a second natural way to get rid of the Mystic Mine, which is the Akruki. The Akruki is a field spell, therefore it's not affected by the condition of Mystic Mine. Therefore, because you can still summon monsters, just not declare the attack or activate their effects, you can still make a synchro summon of a light beast, therefore you can just get rid of it, like nothing. You can see how Yami, when it released it was in a very strong position to deal with Mystic Mine without having to add anything to the deck, literally. And even if we go all the way back to today's times when the Herald is banned, well, obviously Yami Radiant is a very popular version of the deck, right? Which means that you have like 10, 12 outs to the Mystic Mine. So as you can see, Yami and any Radiant Typhoon variant whatsoever has the Mystic Mine really in a corner. And every deck actually, because now Mystic Mine is searchable with a card that can also let you draw 2 cards. So not that convincing, right? Let's go yet with another Justice Hunter deck. Let's go now with Dracotel. Obviously, Dracotel has literally a card in their engine that can negate the Mystic Mine. However, this will keep the Mystic Mine on the field, so that's something that I'm aware of. Regardless of that, if you just negate the Mystic Mine, you can pop it either with the Urgula after using it with 5 mana or Mululu to make fusion and pop it, because this is negated until the end of the turn because of this, and therefore you can activate effects to get rid of it that turn. Or you can use any of your traps whenever they try to activate the Mystic Mine. You activate one trap, and if they don't chain it, you can just chain your Urgula and pop the Mystic Mine before this activation resolves. Because it's like your opponent is activating Mystic Mine, you are like this, you chain line 2 the trap or any trap whatsoever, and as chain line 3, because this is still not in full effect, you can just chain the Urgula and just go and pop it, right? So you can see now how they have a way to negate it and a way to pop it. Not only with only the Urgula, but but the Gulamel. Urgula, Gulamel, and even the Flame. Now, even if we, even if we go with the side deck, every single Dracotel player is gonna have this in their side deck, which means that now whenever you put the Mystic Mine post side deck, you are going to have to deal also with this kind of cards that also gets rid of your Mystic Mine, just as if you were activating a Chalice or a Harpy Feather Duster at that point, right? So you can see how even though Mystic Mine seems to have a very powerful effect, their actual interactions and the actual ways that the deck can avoid this card to resolve are no different than when your opponent tries to activate Raigeki against a Yami deck or Harpy Feather Duster against a Dracotel deck, because the ways you have to interact and avoid those cards to resolve are with basically the same cards and the same effects. We can take this even further and go with the other Justice Hunter deck, the Canine, because in their development of their combo, they're gonna have this quick spell. So whenever you are playing the game and you are activating the Mystic Mine, they can just activate this at any moment of the main phase, overlay here, and thanks to the quick spell, pop your Mystic Mine. And you're not gonna tell me that people are not gonna play this combo, right? Like, come on. So you see, especially if Mystic Mine is around. So you can see how the three engines of Justice Hunters, just by the development of their own cards and the nature combo that you want to leave with those decks, can deal with Mystic Mine just like if it's Forbidden Chalice. So and this gets worse because the decks prior to Justice Hunters and the decks after Justice Hunters can deal with this card just as easy, because let's say for example you go with the Mitsurugi deck. Obviously the Mitsurugi deck has the Mitsurugi trap, which can negate the Mystic Mine. However, the Mitsurugi matchup has a lot of other different advantages against Mystic Mine. For example, Mystic Mine has a condition. If at the end phase you and your opponent control the same amount of monsters, this card will activate it in the end phase to pop itself. What does that mean? Usually when your opponent is trying to deck you out with Mystic Mine, they are not gonna summon any monsters, so you don't have the opportunity to match their monster and start to activating monster effects, right? So the thing with the Mitsurugis is that if they leave you with an empty board and they pass, you can just in end phase activate the Mitsurugi prayers, tribute whatever reptile you have on the field, add follow-up. Because you don't have monsters on the field, you can activate the effect of the Mitsurugi you tribute to gain another follow-up, and then you just don't decide to special summon it back, which means that in the end phase you have 0 monsters. Your opponent has 0 monsters too, because they just pass, and therefore the Mystic Mine pops. You have 2 different cards to follow up in your hand and all your other cards. Therefore, Mystic Mine, at that point this Mystic Mine will have been better if it was something else, literally anything else. So obviously with Mitsurugi or Mitsurugi variants, this card will, like Mystic Mine, will have sucked too. Now let's go with decks after Justice Hunters. For example, the future of the game, the Kultuns, right? The Kultuns, first, the obvious. The Kultun have a negate on the field that can allow them, if yes, it won't allow the Mystic Mine to go to the graveyard. However, because of how Kultun works, they will have in your turn a lot of different ways to get rid of spells in your board. So even though if they are in this worst position when they are forced to use the Eras to negate this until the end of the turn, will have other ways in the development of their own combo to get rid of this. Like for example, using the quick spell in your turn to add the Reko, then make Synchro, and the Reko in the graveyard will pop the Mystic Mine. So you can see how even this worst scenario can help you with just their engine go against the Mystic Mine. However, there's another card you need to worry about, which is this one, because this can copy the effect of any Kultun in the graveyard whenever your opponent activates a card or effect. So let's say that you have this. Your opponent activate the Mystic Mine. You as Chainlink 2 will chain the Loudness Ward. You will banish the Reko in your graveyard, and you will gain the effect to pop a spell or trap in your opponents. Therefore, you just put the Mystic Mine, and this card didn't do nothing. As you can see, again, didn't do nothing, because this card can even exchange itself with the normal development of any combo that I just showed you. Literally any combo that I just showed you. So if the present with Justice Hunters, if the past with Mitsurugi or Detone popping the Mystic Mine, or Malice with the trap card and adding something and then banish it, or chaining Crypters to banishing this Mystic Mine as Chainlink 2, if all those pre-Justice Deck Hunters also disrespect the Mine, and the decks post Justice Hunters also disrespect the Mystic Mine, why is this card still banned? Some people may think because it is busted, how you can kinda make it also not only a board breaker going second and a win condition, but as a floodgate going first, because you can set the metaverse that now is at 3. You can wait until your opponent compromise some monsters, and then you activate the metaverse, you put the Mystic Mine, and your opponent technically loses, right? So there's a lot of problems with this way to play and this line of thinking. And this will be first related to how it's not 2018 anymore. There are a lot of cards that you should be taking accountability for when it comes to what you expect your opponent to have. First, the obvious. You are putting yourself in a position when, if they have the Ash for your metaverse, like, you technically lose. However, and think about it, how many floodgates can exchange themselves with Ash Blossom, and how many floodgates will be as if they could be exchanged so easily with a hand trap? Metaverse is doing that, which sucks, and will suck even more because in today's times, we also have the Dominus Purge that can also negate the metaverse. So if you had this problem before, now you have double. And if this weren't enough, even if this card successfully don't get hand trap, if your opponent has popular cards in his side deck that are very popular in today's time, you will lose the Mystic Mine too. First, yes, this card already existed back in Mystic Mine times. However, this time is guaranteed popularity in the side decks, even if this card don't exist. So now you are putting yourself in a position when your side deck don't play around your opponent's side deck, which is one of the worst situations you can put yourself in Yu-Gi-Oh! Because there are other cards that you need to consider. A card that was banned when this card was printed and banned too, which is Harpy Feather Duster. Now, you have 3 different cards in your opponent's side deck, if not 4, because some people are even playing 3 of Lighting, that can exchange with any of these 2 on your field. So I don't see how this is a good investment as a floodgate going first post side deck when you consider this reality, right? Because to this you need to add, besides these 2 that I just told you, you have to add that as long as Dracotail is popular, there's also the possibility of Double Cyclone being in your opponent's side deck. So you can see how a lot of the currents of today's side deck can easily exchange itself guarantee with the Mystic Mine, without your opponent being able to do basically anything about it. So Metaverse, ass. Mystic Mine, ass. Therefore, why is this card banned still? Well, we all know at this point that Konami likes to unban cards whenever they have an actual purpose for the card. So, for example, Stratos was useless for, I think, 5-6 years, and they released it as a limited to sell legendary decks that include a hero deck with Stratos. So that had sense. That is why Stratos is at 3 today. Now, I don't think that is the reason why Mystic Mine is still banned, because there are no archetypes related to the card, and there has been a lot of different board breakers that people have labeled as toxic that have not been limited or even banned. For example, Dark Ruler no more, Dimensional Shifter is still at 1. So why is this specific card banned? I think that first, a lot of people were complaining about not knowing how to deal and respect this card, because for some reason there are people that play Yu-Gi-Oh! Not to think, which to me is completely unreasonable. You shouldn't be playing this game if you don't want to think. But the point is that people play regardless, and they were crying and crying. It was literally an endless crying about this card just because people didn't like to think too much. Well, that I think that is the first very strong reason for this card to be banned. Just you know, stupid democracy. However, I think that there's an even bigger reason for this card to be banned, and it is how Konami wants to approach its game. This is very important to understand. Yu-Gi-Oh! Is an intellectual challenge, and just like the gym, if you face the same physical challenge and you don't change that challenge, your muscle is not going to develop that well, right? People that go to the gym will understand what I'm trying to say. It's always necessary to change the exercise whenever you go to the gym, to challenge yourself, your physique, so you can get it better. You need diversity, you need variety, you need different options and different ways to exercise your muscles. The same is with Yu-Gi-Oh! Yu-Gi-Oh! Needs to constantly change their intellectual challenges so your brain can keep making the work, the dynamic work of thinking about these different natures of challenges. And that is what Mystic Mind was. Just another intellectual challenge that Konami decided to get rid of so they can make different intellectual challenges, so they can allow other specific interactions to have more success. I'm gonna give you two examples. Two cards that are actually negations, but they can work against the mind because of how they are designed. And this, so the two examples I'm gonna give is the Fiendsmith Desire and the Asamina Sylvia. Why I'm saying these two, if these two are technically negates, right? Technically these two can negate the mind. The problem, both of these cards negates the effect. This negates cards on the field, just negates their effects on the field. This negates the effect activation, not the activation of the card. What does that mean? Because this is a field spell, if I activate it and you negate the effect, because you are not negating the activation, I'm pretty sure that this card stays, because of the same way that a continuous spell will stay. Because this negates the effect, not the activation. The card successfully activated itself. The same with Desire. If I change the Desire to the Mystic Mind, I'm just negating it for the end of the turn. So this will only work if I need to use more of my engines to get rid of this card. But what Fiendsmith card gets rid of Mystic Mind at that point? Any card. It's not the same as the Dracotail example, because in the Dracotail example I am still using this development of my same combo. I'm not adding anything else. In this case I will need to add something else for the Desire to successfully get rid of the Mystic Mind. So as you can see, these two cards can be printed the way they are printed if they keep Mystic Mind on the game, because they will be forced to put that Sylvia negates the activation, so it can exchange itself with the Mystic Mind, and they will have to change the whole phrasing of how Desire works, just so they can negate the activation of the mind too. And these designs of these two were on purpose for a lot of different reasons. And if you want to know those reasons, if this video gets to 15 likes, I'm gonna make a whole video explaining why the current negates of the game most of the time says negate the effect instead of negate the activation. In the meantime, you can see how Mystic Mine is a beautiful card, is a very ass and mid card in today's times, and you also know why it will keep be on the ban side for a while. So if you enjoy it, leave a like, subscribe, let your people know about the channel, and I'll see you tomorrow.